So why are we here today? So most of you are Africa Arena alumni, and you had pitched to one of our Africa Arena events. And by doing so, you are eligible for AWS credits. So what we have noticed is that most of the startups enroll to the program, but they don't use it to its full potential. So the aim of the webinar today is to explain to you how the program works, and also to give you the opportunity to ask all the questions that you might have. Before we start, I just wanted to say a big thank you to Henri and his team to put the contents together, and also for taking the time to take us through the program. So I will hand over to you, Henri, if you are ready.
Yes, thanks a lot for that warm introduction. I just want to say thanks for everybody for joining today. It's highly appreciated. You're welcome to reach myself or Veliswa anytime after the event as well. So I just want to share the screen. Cool. Great stuff. So welcome to day one. During this talk, I will share the many reasons why startups build on AWS and how to successfully partner as a startup or a venture firm wanting to work with the startup programs. We've been helping startups build for over 13 years, and we've been the preferred cloud for startups since the beginning. Startups like Airbnb, Epic, Fortnite, startups who's done IPOs like Netflix. And of course, we're helping the dating scene with startups like Tinder. In South Africa, I can definitely mention Data Profit, who's doing machine learning for manufacturing, Aerobotics, who's doing machine learning for tree top analysis, Ozo, Payment Tech, OneCart, Pineapple for insurance, Naked Insurance, Luno, Flutterwave for the rest of Africa, Nigeria, Paystack, and of course, even Jumia. These startups started with AWS with the first line of code and the first of hopefully many delighted customers. Whether you're a startup in ideation or deployment or reaching for scale, AWS have programs for you. So my name is Henri Zietsman. I come from over 20 years of working within the ICT, information technology sector across the whole of Africa. Before I left the world of enterprises, I decided to start my own business, an agri-tech, fintech business. I ran commercial, technical, dev and delivery operations in the ICT sector, where I've managed many programs focused on telecoms, prepaid, VAS, regionally billing, IoT projects, even mobile TV, and countries like Nigeria, Ghana, Kenya, and of course in the rest of Africa. In fact, I counted 22. I share my background because I'm just one of the many members of the startup team here at Amazon with both extensive startup ecosystem experience, interested in sharing knowledge and expertise with you. There is a reason why for the past 13 years, overwhelming startups prefer AWS. Go ask the most successful startups in your market, and the majority of them are using AWS. These startups selected AWS for a collection of reasons. First, we understand startups. We know that there's massive challenges in getting a business off the ground. We started as a startup back in 1996, and we continue to operate like one today. We have a dedicated startup business development team comprising of ex-founders, exited startup founders, former investors, and even startup executives from accelerators, incubators, and VCs. The team works closely with all the top VCs and accelerators globally, as well as the incubators. These are startup experts who understand development business plans, approaches to user acquisition, marketing like a startup, hiring like a startup, and what a good pitch deck looks like. And we know how to build fast. Second, we have developed a number of programs here at Amazon to help you engage with not just the millions of customers on AWS, but also the millions of shoppers on Amazon.com. programs to help tap into marketplaces, partner networks, credits, of course, we can talk about that, business support, technical support for startups, and more, which I'll tell you about shortly. Third, startups choose AWS because we offer the broadest technical capabilities. With more than 175 servers available for you today, from AWS Ground Station, or deploying millions of IoT devices into farming industry with AWS IoT Core, these services all help you to get to the market in record time. Let's talk about this technology. The way startups compete today is in the quickest time to market, keeping your costs low and continuing to innovate on behalf of your customer. Because of the pay-as-you-grow pricing of AWS, startups do not have to estimate how much computing resources to provision and pay upfront for a computing infrastructure which you might not use in full. Instead, with AWS, startups can pay only for the resources you use, much like you would from a utility service point of view. AWS on-demand infrastructure allows startups to spin up computing resources in a matter of minutes with just a few clicks of a mouse instead of weeks or even months it would take to set up the hardware and the database and the servers and even get the costs for operational efficiencies ready. Thanks to these cost efficiency benefits of cloud, startups are able to experiment often, fail faster, I call that pivoting. The startup disrupt and innovate by essentially testing a series of hypotheses. These hypotheses are not always right at the first, and it might fail. So therefore, we'll present also what is an MVP a bit later. All this ultimately means is that the startup can focus on your core business value. I mentioned the order of being competitive. The AWS technology is available for all startups, not just the Fortune 500 top companies. So if you are running into problems, you can go and join our user groups, and there's a good chance that lots of the challenges you're facing has been solved already. The pace is tremendous, as you can see. I mean, today we are launching more than 5 new features each day. So keeping up to pace with that is not easy, and therefore we have startup solution architects that can help you guide and navigate. This is not supposed to scare you in terms of the technology stack, but it's very good to know that if you need tools to do AR, VR, you can use Sumerian, for example, right? If you want to do ingestion of data and get insights, you can use Kinesis. If you want to train your own machine learning models, then you can use a SageMaker tool. Of course, machine learning and AI are big topics as data continues to play a more important role in how companies compete. We have a wide range of offerings from core raw services for the advanced data scientist to entire machine learning environments like SageMaker that make it easy to build, train, and deploy machine learning models. If you don't have machine learning experience, you can tap into one of the many of our AI services that will help your product hear, speak, translate, comprehend, and make predictions with simple API calls. So in 2005, it cost around $500,000 to build a new platform and a new service or a startup. When S3 and RDS, relational databases and storage, Compute EC2 was launched, that cost came down tremendously to $50,000 by 2010. In 2019, we identified that it costs around $5,000 to build out an MVP on AWS. Now, what does that really mean from a startup point of view? Give an example of somebody in New York. It's a single man founder startup. It's Appel. They like the kayak for ground transportation. Appel's managing millions of users, and they're doing that essentially on AWS. Appel was founded with one person and still operates with one employee. The founder built this at the AWS Loft. They joined, for example, pitching events, also arranged with partners. However, that's not going to be how you scale. You can start with a simple tier 3 type architecture, which is typically your compute and your RDS and your application service, web services architecture. What we also then see is that the startups then utilize the free resources like educational services that's online to consider to modernize. And for example, in Apple's case, they've progressed up to building the serverless architecture, which means they can look after infinite scales while reducing their costs. Another example would be Pineapple. This is more closer to home. Pineapple is an interesting startup and insurtech startup based in Joburg. 3 founders that started with this idea that they can essentially offer insurance much more efficiently using an app. The app basically does a picture and you are placed in a community, and from there you can basically get insurance. This is just another example of a startup, and quite recently, Pineapple has also been into new investment rounds going forward, and they're building on AWS. We can talk about Naked Insurance, similar journey as well, Take Control, and other insurtech. So all of this really changes how the venture capital landscape looks like. There's a really cool report. I'm going to leave these slides and share the slides, obviously, afterwards, about what this all means. It means that when a startup is engaging with the investor, you don't need that thick term sheet for these smaller kind of ticketing rounds to get going. But of course, in the group today, we've got alumni, and I'll talk about how to look at the technical due diligence as a service offering that AWS has for you. So the most successful startups built on AWS, you can see quite a few from across Africa: robotics, Ayala Credit, banking. And of course, you can come down to Kenya, Sendiet, you've got Stripe, so on. Kudigo is another good example. I hope to see some of you on this slides one day as well. AWS has the largest community of builders. With such a large community, it's going to be much easier to make the right technical hires for your company. We, for example, got a lot of meetups, 1,000 plus Reddit users, 75,000 Stack Overflows, thousands pages online, GitHub repos, etc. online. And these numbers probably should be updated now as well. But let's talk about the programs. You might have been introduced to one, which is Activate, and we'll talk about that later. But let's talk about where you are. Let's talk about technical due diligence. Now, of course, when you go to an investor, the first thing they're going to do is start doing a due diligence. And one of that aspects includes a technical due diligence. Now, how would you do that? AWS has a tool online. It's called the Well-Architected Framework. It's packaging and looking after your operational excellence. You don't have to be on AWS to use this framework. It's understood by venture firms for more than 13 years, really. We talk about operational excellence, as your DevOps, your security, which is very important from day one, especially with GDPR and all the compliances like PCI and HIPAA compliances. It looks after reliability, performance, efficiency, and ultimately you're balancing all those pillars against the cost pillar. So it's highly encouraged. If you're interested, we can assign an advanced partner to help you do that, which is really cool because you end up having a 62-page due diligence, which shows you the top 4, remedials that you might want to expedite to essentially be in a good shape going forward. Now, it's important the cost pillar because that's the credit part that's going to burn out. Credits do run out, and we'll talk about that again a little bit later. Highly encourage, if you're not aware about this, have a look at the Well-Architected Framework. There's even one for a B2Bs for SaaS Lens, which is really exciting. If you are in B2B or you are looking for investors, we have access to, we do build use cases with enterprises and investors where you can essentially look through the curated list of opportunities available. It's called AWS Connections, and you can then get a soft referral into the enterprise. And obviously the purpose behind that is to help you close a deal sooner or get a deal, in terms of investment round sooner as well. Then if you're an independent software vendor type approach startup, you know, you're in B2B, it's not always easy meeting the top enterprises. But if you're really into the tech, DevOps and security type frameworks, and you're delivering a tool or something like that, then I highly recommend to look at the startup marketplace. This is a curated, what we call sellers marketplace for startups. The cool part is you can list your platform in that environment, and you would be immediately available for purchasing, as well as deployment by enterprises, potentially your next customers. A good example of that is Snap from Cape Town. They do web acceleration. They're leveraging the marketplace in such a way, and it's really cool because it helps them deploy much faster into enterprises. And essentially through the marketplace listing process, you will get access into new markets like USA, UK, etc. So I highly recommend, if you are on that journey, have a look at that program called Startup Marketplace. I'll leave the resources at the end for you as well. If you do have something to sell, a physical item, then definitely recommend look at Amazon Launchpad. This is for a startup that really can't do a 2-hour delivery turnover in terms of filling up warehouses and selling through. But as a startup, you can definitely go and list there, and that will help you to curb your cost in terms of production and so on. You get up to a month to supply your goods, and you get free marketing as well. Amazon Alexa is a fund. We have a climate change fund as well. These funds are looking at specific items. You're welcome to go and apply for that if you're in any sort of voice enablement. A good example of a startup that's gone into that and actually ended up being, acquired is Ring, the door startup. It will give you access to, for example, the development kits, Alexa skill set kits, etc., etc. But ultimately, you aim towards to get into a fund, right? And now AWS Activate. AWS Activate, how it works, it is up to $25,000 for up to 2 years on AWS, plus tech support for up to 2 years. If you're a vested startup, in other words, you had a investment round, you can get up to $100,000, but that's only for a year. So it's typically better for a startup to consider the longer term option. If you're not clear how, what the best option is for you, it's highly recommended that you do the online cost estimator, which I'll share the link for at the end as well. The best part of the Activate program is it gives you access to tech support. Means that the tech team can log a ticket in the AWS console, and you would be able to get a response from the technical support team, whether it's an architectural question or whether it's a very much functional question. You can log your requests there. So as I said, the most successful startups build on AWS, and definitely I would love to see some of the startups be on the screen. It's definitely possible. There's a link for that if you're so inclined. It will give you access to being, presented, get free spotlights, PR spotlights. Basically, it's a program where we run PR for startups to help them reach the market. Of course, not everybody wants that at a certain time, but you're the best to know. So do reach if you're interested in telling people what problems you're solving and why you're solving it. If you say something nice about AWS, that's pretty cool as well. So just to recap, we understand startups. Basically, our team is all entrepreneurs. We have proven programs for you. I didn't go through all the programs, not the B2B, all the detailed programs. We can go into that separately as well. And of course, we have a broader set of services available for you just to make sure that you can reach the market as fast as possible. While you're building a startup, definitely head over to Educate, because it's essentially online training to make sure that you're using the tech stacks and the various databases in the right way. I highly recommend that. And here's some resources for you. So please, by all means, I'll share the slides afterwards. And of course, there's my contact details if you would like to reach. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Henri, for the presentation.
Pleasure.
I'm handing over straight to you, Veliswa, and then at the end of the session, we will have time for some Q&A.
Sure. Thank you so much. Let me share my screen very quickly. Okay, Henri is done. Okay. There we Okay, thank you so much. Okay, hi everyone. Thank you so much for inviting me here today. Really excited to be here as AWS. So I'm going to talk about tools, and but we'll start with an introduction of where I fit into the picture, a recap of MVPs and how to build one, test one, and then we'll look at some of the tools and some of the architecture patterns that we can actually take advantage of on AWS. So let me just move on. One thing that I know from interactions with developers and some startup founders is it's always when you're building on AWS, founders are asking, where do I find developers? And developers saying, where do I find opportunities? I want to work at a startup. Where do we meet? And I've found those places where you can actually meet those people, and we're going to touch on those just now. That's just very quickly about me. I'm Veliswa Boya. I'm a senior developer advocate at AWS. I'm based in Johannesburg, South Africa, but I work with the user group or the developer community throughout sub-Saharan Africa. There are all my contacts on social media. That's where you can get hold of me. I'm on Twitter. I will share them at the end. I'm on Twitter. I'm on LinkedIn. That Slack channel that you see there, it is where the AWS community in Africa actually gets together. So if you've got a technical question you're building on AWS and you want to ask something, you want to network, that is where you would go. Henri touched on all the meetup groups that are available globally for AWS. We have these ones here in sub-Saharan Africa. We have one in Cape Town, Pretoria, Johannesburg, Kenya, Nigeria, Ghana, and Cameroon, and we've just had one that started up in Benin. So the community really is growing and is very active and engaged in sub-Saharan Africa right now. So it's a very exciting time. So what are we going to talk about? We're going to very quickly look at what and why an MVP. And then we'll talk about once you start to prepare to communicate your MVP idea, what will help you with that. And we'll touch on how to develop and test your MVP, the importance of an MVP in your journey as an entrepreneur, and AWS and your MVP journey. And that's where we'll start to look at the tools that are available and the architecture patterns that we can actually leverage on AWS. So quick recap, what is an MVP? An MVP is your minimum viable product, or what we call an MVP. It's the first product that you've built. Some of you may have already built this, so you've got an idea of what that actually looks like. It's your first product that you use to find your product market fit for your startup. And many startups actually use this MVP to scale their business. So you can start small and then you scale on this, and later on you might rewrite parts as required. If you just remember from Henri's talk about the well-architected framework, that can also guide you in what parts are going to improve of this MVP. So that's very quickly what that is. This is a saying from one of the co-founders of LinkedIn. They say, if you aren't embarrassed by your first version of your product, you ship too late. And why this? I think this is driven so much by, I think your MVP or your product that you're building, it's almost like your baby. And I know that with a lot of us startup founders out there, it can happen that you end up taking way too much time wanting to perfect this before you put it out there. That taking too much time wanting it to be perfect could be what actually results in you shipping too late. And so it's something to always guard against, that you don't take so much time trying to perfect and adding features. Go out there, because what you want is actually feedback as much as possible. And that feedback is what should actually guide what features you add on later on, what you take away, what you improve on. So just something to remember. And now we talk about communicating your MVP idea. So now you've got this idea. Now you want to transform your idea into a reality. How do you decide on an approach so that you best communicate this idea of yours? How do you frame up your idea so that the concept is very clear and it's well defined? The thing is now that communication is both sides. You want to communicate to your funders and you want to communicate to your tech team. How do you have this story that makes sense both sides? There's 4 points that we're going to look at. There's more that you can consider, but we're just going to touch on these very quickly. Very first thing that you need to remember to do is that you need to focus on the problem. You are the solution provider. You're someone who's used to solving things, and that sometimes can be what becomes the challenge. You've got the solution in your head, and you want to communicate the solution before you actually focus and build more detail around what the problem is, communicating what the problem is before you jump to the solution. So the thing here to remember is that you need to focus on the problem, be able to articulate that very well, and then you can move on to talking about the solution. The next thing is to have a clear MVP. And with this, have a clear definition of what your MVP or your MVP is. Here, you're outlining your basic minimum features that you need to take the product to the market. And that will help you with what we talked about a couple of slides back, where you don't want to spend so much time trying to perfect and adding features. You want to outline those basic minimum features before you actually even start to move to build anything. That will guide you and protect you from all of that trying to perfect your MVP. The next thing is your customer. When we talk about your customer, is you need to know who your customer is, because your customer is going to do the talking for you. There are multiple ways that you can actually find out who this customer is and find out what their interest is. We're going to look at those a little bit later. This is going to help you engage with them, because now you know who they are, so then you can engage with them and you know what questions to ask them when you actually do engage with them. And lastly on this, but of course there's more information, think like the CEO that you are, because you already are a CEO. And this can require a mindset shift. And with this is that you now are focusing, again, what we talked about, you're focusing on on who your customer is and what the problem is, and not obsessing so much about that solution as yet. This is where you then develop a clear business model. So we talk about a minimum viable product, and there are many. So I've got the X there because it can be an MVP. Sometimes you hear though about MUPs, MLPs, and MTPs, and we'll talk about each of these. Viable, we've already talked about. Viable, you are looking to check whether your solution or your product, is it workable? So when you put your product out there could be various things that you're looking out for. Viable is the one that we're already talking about. Is it workable? Is it reasonable? And when we talk about usable, you're looking to check, is it what you do here, you optimize for getting the product in your customer's hands early on so that you can get user feedback. So you just want to make sure that they can use it so that you can collect that feedback as quickly as possible. Is it lovable? When you talk about lovable, this would apply to a product that what you've put out is already out there in the market. Let's say a banking app. There are so many of them out there. So when you're actually going to ship another banking app, what you want is, the customer that you're targeting, would they leave what they're already using and come and use yours? And that's what you're looking for with the lovable. Is it lovable? Would it make someone else switch from what they're using and come and use your product? When we talk about a product being testable, it's what you would be looking out for. You would optimize for dimensions that look to disprove a concept. And I'll explain what this means. Testable. Henri talked about Airbnb. When they first went out, it was a very first of its kind, or one of very few of its kind. And there was a lot around. No one is going to give up their house, rent it out to strangers. So when Airbnb put out their MVP, they had to optimize to disprove that. So they had to optimize to say, no, look, people can actually are happy to rent out their houses. So the features that they put out were to actually optimize and disprove this. So that is testing the testable portion of this. So while your first customers are likely to be early adopters of your product still needs to work. After all, you are using it to solve an important problem for them. Now we're going to look at two ways that one way is this is not how you put out a product, and the next one is this is how you put out a product. Remember, we're saying your customer must still be able to use it even if it has very minimum or minimal features. This is not how you would put it out, because up until you get to the car, this is not usable. So that's not how you would do it. This, however, is workable. As you improve, it gets better, but they already are able to use it with the minimum features. So that's what you're looking for when you say, but it goes back to it being viable, it being usable. Now we're going to talk about developing and testing your MVP. Building your MVP is a process. So you need to have a development process that will help you iterate fast in order to deliver a lot of value for your customer. It's just, again, going through what we talked about, that a minimum viable product, minimum features, so that you can put it out on the market, and then you can get that feedback, and that feedback helps you improve on those features, or take away or put in some features. This aligns again to that pace of innovation, because that's what you want to make sure that you are optimizing on. So this is where you would start. You design, you build, you deploy, and then you measure. We're going to talk about how you do the measuring a little bit later on, but you're iterating on all of these each time. So now we're talking about your developers, your dev team, talking about the people that are mentioned very early on in the beginning that you find in these meetup groups. You saw Henri also talked about Reddit, where we all are, and all the communities. You've got your development team now. You need to make sure that they actually focus on the work that they are meant to. We talk about sprints, and we talked about iterations earlier on as well. So iterations take the form of a sprint, and each sprint should be about one thing and aim to deliver a usable release at the end of each sprint. 3 features of a good sprint actually ensure a very good chance of what we're talking about. Your sprint has to be complete. Although it's short, it has to be complete. It has to be uninterrupted, and then it has to be short. We're going to talk very quickly what each of these means. When we talk about it being complete, a complete sprint is a burst of work that are preceded by planning and followed by a retrospective. Those of us who've worked in development teams, we know about retros. And the sprint contains everything that you need to deliver that one feature. Your developers have to work without interruptions, and that's the uninterrupted part of it. If you're the CEO, which you are, we know you've got these amazing new ideas that you're coming up with all the time, but you have to find a way to keep the new ideas to yourself or park them somewhere, because you cannot interrupt the sprint that's already in progress. Of course, we talk about this. We know that practical application doesn't always work that way, but this is ideally what you want to actually drive or work towards. And your developer on your team Their job is to deliver the work that's been committed to and push back on anything else. But of course, our development teams, our sprint teams are made up of various roles, and there can be those who help with the pushback and some do the actual work. But this is just overall the idea. There's no fixed time on a sprint, and this is the short, but you want it to be short. The shorter, the better. We talk about 1 week sprints. Ideally, what you should actually aim for, but like I already said, there's no fixed time for a sprint. But what you need to remember is what you want is you want a fast delivery, and that's what you actually want, because you want to get out there on the market as quickly as possible and get that feedback. Now we're going to talk about planning. So everything that you do will seem so important, but you need to prioritize what gets done in each sprint. What you normally would do instinctively is you would look for the expected benefit of each feature, and then you would break up the expected development time. With all of this, what you need to make sure is that there are very minimal distractions. You have a focus area, so that's where now you know the feature that you actually want to work on. Breakdown is when your feature is too big. You need to actually go back, because you want ultimately to have that very short sprint. So you might need to consider breaking down your that feature so that you can have a very short sprint, and then you don't work on undifferentiated features. That means features that the customer is not going to see or not going to care about. This is not what you're going to be focusing on and obsessing about with your MVP. And now we talk about collecting and analyzing the feedback. Here, you want to make sure that you're optimizing for learning. So you've started at the beginning, you've defined your MVP, you've built it, you've tested it, your product has gone out there, and you've collected your customer feedback. Now, how do you analyze all of this feedback, and what do you do with this feedback that you're getting? A couple of slides back, we talked about defining your MVP and ensuring that you focus on the problem. You've done that, and you're ready to do your iteration. How are you collecting this feedback? So you're collecting because you're going to measure later on. So how do you collect? There are various ways that you can do this. I've just put up one of the ways that you can. We're not going to look at all of them today, but these are just some of the most commonly used ways of collecting that feedback from your customers. You can actually do this before you build your product and after you've put out your MVP, because you're constantly talking to your customer and wanting to find out what actually works for them and what doesn't actually work. It's actually something that us here at AWS, we align to very much. Nothing that we build is something that we've just thought up. It's very customer driven, customer feedback driven. So customer interviews are one of the ways. Here you talk to your would-be customer or your customer. When you do leave the questions as open-ended as possible so that you can get back as much information as possible from them. The other way that you could do this is to run surveys, and there are various ways that you can do this. A survey or a forum questions that you could do. There are apps that are available today in the market that you could leverage, like a SurveyMonkey is very commonly used. But these days, people use social media as well. You see those people running surveys on LinkedIn, on Twitter, and all those other platforms. It's all to try and get feedback. Something else that you could do is to run pre-orders. So nothing is stopping you from doing this. So what you could do is to create a mock-up of your product that you're about to release, and have a description of it, and then you offer discounts to those who place early orders, and those would be the people that you would start getting feedback from already. Now we're going to talk about measuring. So what kind of metrics should you then look at? What kind of a metric will depend a lot on your short-term goals and your long-term goals. The best way generally for you to go about it is to work your path from the big picture to the small picture. And that's how you'll be able to decide what kind of metrics you actually wanna focus on. The different kinds of metrics, and we're gonna look at just the three that are most commonly what people actually look at. There is quantitative, a metric that you can look at. This is the most common form of a metric, and this lets you track and report usage of your product at a high level. So as an example, you could track average user session. I like to use the example of a YouTube channel here, and we'll see when we go to the next metric what I mean. So let's say YouTube channel. Quantitative, you are looking at how many people actually clicked on the video that you released. That's quantitative, how many people. And then the next one that you're going to look at is a qualitative metric. This one focuses on the individual actions of your user or a small group of users. Now, still keeping with the YouTube channel of video that you've released. So quantitative is how many clicked, qualitative, how many stayed, or how long do they actually hang around watching your video. So that's a qualitative metric that you can look at. And the last one that you can look at is a comparative one. Comparative is, this is not comparing with someone else's product. This is looking at the features that you've released. How many, which of the features seems to be the one that your customers are actually drawn to the most. So, and those could be the metrics then that you hold on to, and they could drive what you do within your next iteration with your next feature. Now we're going to take AWS and your MVP journey. So you've built your app, and now let's say you're now going to be building on AWS. What's available on AWS, and where would you start? That could be another thing. Starting with a monolith is often the most common way, or there's nothing wrong with it. Usually it's where people start when they deploy on even in a cloud or in any cloud, depending on where you were before. This is the quickest way because you don't have to design or redesign your product. You can just move or build as it is. But over time, depending on what your product does, you might need to consider decoupling and not have a monolith. So what's available on AWS as you want to, because we've been talking about you need to iterate, you need to get your product out there as quickly as possible. You want to continuously ship your releases. These are just some of the products that form that CI/CD pipeline that helps you with that. CodeStar, AWS CodeStar, creates a continuous delivery toolchain for you in minutes on AWS. It has a unified interface that helps you manage your software development activities in one place. So these are some of the, do I call them mini services? They're not. They're services on their own, but they form part of that CodeStar toolchain. Code commit is where you host your source code. I understand you could have your source code outside of AWS, say on GitHub or GitLab. We still integrate, so it's not an issue at all. So you could have your code somewhere else, and GitHub and all of those, we still are able to integrate with our build, test, and deploy services. So source code could be on AWS Code Commit, and code build is where you would build your code. Test, you could leverage some third-party tooling. In this, we do have available. We looked at the marketplace earlier on. Some could be there, you could leverage those, but we are always integrating with, especially open source. We're integrating with so many of these third-party tools, and some making them natively available for you as managed services on AWS. So you can leverage those as well. And then there is a service code deploy, and this is you deploying your application onto production. It offers you that CI/CD pipeline. So you've got the complete pipeline available for you on AWS. So we talk about, again, you want to be out there very quickly. So what you want to make sure is that you build less and deliver more. And our services being sure that this is what you actually get out of everything. We've kind of looked at this already, but again, just to reiterate, we want to make sure that you do very minimal to no infrastructure provisioning and no management. And we make this possible for you by providing all those managed services on AWS, so you don't need to worry about that. You want to make sure that you scale automatically, that you pay for value, and that your product is highly available and secure. We have services that make sure that we take care of this for you. I've already talked about monoliths and what they are. You've got one. Uh, when I talk about this, I just picture code, and you've got this long, especially I come from very structured programming where you've got, especially mainframes, you've got this long, big piece of code and it does everything. That's awesome, but now when you want to maintain, it becomes a bit of a challenge. So this is why we say later on, you might want to consider decoupling the features. Each feature has its own piece of code or its own function. That's what it would translate to on AWS. Now, we provide you the easiest way to get started. There is a service called Amazon Lightsail. What this provides you is computing power, and it's Lightsail is it's a very, very small VM on AWS. But it integrates with all of these other services that help you make sure that you can perform networking and data transfer. You can connect to other AWS services, so it does integrate, and it makes it easy for you to deploy websites like WordPress, Magento, Plesk, or Joomla on AWS, or web applications with pre-configured development stacks like LAMP, Nginx, Node.js. Lightsail makes it easy for you to get online quickly and simply. So this could be another place for you to start when you're bringing that monolith program or application to AWS. You could start here. And what we're looking at here is, now we talked about scale. We talked about security, and we talked about high availability. This could be a typical architecture pattern that you could leverage for still your monolith. Your auto-scaling group makes sure that you get to scale. We have this makes sure you've got our availability zones are like your data centers. We're making sure that you provided with high availability of your application at all times. So if you build following this architecture pattern, if you go down in AZ1, your application is still available in AZ2. So this could be another architecture pattern that you could consider leveraging for a monolith application. Later on, we're going to look at what it would look like when you've gone and decoupled it. What services would you then be able to leverage? Microservices, you've now gone and decoupled it. You've got microservices. Let's just go very quickly back to that slide. Just keep this in mind. Here, see, you've got everything all in one. And now we're talking microservices. And now you've decoupled. So one service does one thing. This makes it easy for you to build and scale your large applications. Each service is tasked with doing the one thing and doing it well. And what's awesome with this is that your developers, there is no dependency on source code. So if, let's say, again, using the example of a banking app, you've got a feature that prints statements and a feature that checks balances. That's not all housed in one long source code. It's got its own function. So if you need to maintain just the balance checks, you go and that's the source code that you actually work with. So this is this helps as well with your velocity, getting your product out there very quickly, because there isn't that dependency. This is ideally where you want to move to later on, and we've got services that support this. We've kind of already seen this. I talked about you want to minimize provisioning infrastructure and managing your infrastructure, and this scale kind of guides you as to where you want to be. This is the AWS operational responsibility model. If you are on this, let me just move my, yeah, if you are playing here, you're playing this side, you still get to do a lot of management or some management yourself. You ideally want to move more this way, because this is where you have more of the managed features, services. I talked about your monolith, where you would deploy it on AWS. You would deploy it here. That's your VM on AWS. But ideally, where you want to move to, this is where we start talking containers. Where you want to move to is here. Once you've decoupled it, that's a function, serverless. So you're not provisioning infrastructure at all. You just bring your source code and you get going. This side, you have NoSQL databases. This side, you've got your relational databases. So you're still doing some maintenance, you're patching, storage. This is serverless storage for objects, Amazon S3. A very cost-effective way of storing objects on AWS. You can store your serverless, you can host a serverless website on Amazon S3 as well. This is your messaging. This is your events management. That starts to move more towards your serverless side of things, where you are not provisioning any infrastructure. And that's the space where ideally you want to ultimately play there. Nothing wrong with being here, but ideally, if you want to meet manage your costs and minimize, especially with startups, because you don't have, and you don't even want this big IT shop where you're going to have people doing all of that for you. You're running lean with everything, so that's ideally where you would want to move to. And talked about microservices before, which you would expose as an API. So what services would you have available on AWS to help you with that? So that would be your service. Let me just display the entire architecture and then we can discuss it. So this is a typical architecture pattern. You've built a mobile app, web app, or a service that you are exposing for consumption by other people. So your microservices, you're exposing it as an API, you're publishing it as an API. That is where you would host you publish your API on Amazon API Gateway. This is how you would secure your application. Amazon Cognito does the authentication of your users, so your customers, onto your app. And then your application could be sitting here, could be on as a container, but this is a serverless way of running containers. This is your functions. That's the object store that we talked about, or any other AWS service that you could decide you wanna work with. So just one of the architecture patterns that you could think to leverage. And the next one is this one. So you've got a mobile app, and again, so we didn't see this in the previous slide. This is CloudFront. CloudFront is our content delivery network. And your app is sitting here, but you want this helps you. Let's say you've got customers everywhere. Here you can control which customers where, get to see what version of your app, and there are a lot of features here, and all of them are with a checkbox. You could decide when you are still putting out your MVP that I just want my customers in in South Africa to have access to this for now. I will collect feedback from them, and then once I'm happy with the feedback, or I've improved it, then I will roll out to all my customers globally. And here on CloudFront, you can control that. You can say only IP addresses coming from ZA have access, and it's a checkbox, and then that's it. So this would be a typical architecture pattern you could leverage. We saw before API Gateway. This is a very similar services, but for GraphQL. And again, that is where your app could be actually residing. Amplify is a service that we have for hosting your front end and the back end of your application. One place, front end and back end, you can actually host there, and then you can publish from there. You can make your application then available to your customers. So just one of the architecture patterns you could actually leverage. And we've already talked about AWS Amplify. If you go into the AWS console, when you deploy your application, that is just what actually happens in the background. And that's like your CI/CD as well that we looked at, but this is for serverless for your mobile and your web applications. So what you want to make sure that you do is that you want to make sure when you best practice when you are building on AWS is that you have multiple environments and team workflow. This is how you could segregate your environments. You've got dev, test, and prod, and we have services on AWS that help you control all of this. When you're deploying, you can deploy to dev and check what you can deploy onto test or whatever stage you want, and check before and perform a couple of checks there and tests before you move on to production, making sure that when your application does get to your customer, it's working the way that you want it to, it's usable for your customer. And the next ones, I'm really just going to fly through, but I'm going to make these slides available for you. You can go and read through them. This would be a typical architecture pattern for, and you want to, your application, sorry, let me just go back. Your application is, there are analytics that are actually being performed. The example that I like to use here, your application is now available for your users and they use it, and you want to collect some analytics on it so that you can perform actions based on what you're actually getting back. And these are the services that can actually help you do that. And I know I was flying through, and I quickly said we've got containers as well. Long ago, people used to talk about a journey on AWS. They would say you start as a monolith on EC2s, and then you move to containers and serverless, but it's not really a journey. You choose where you actually want to be. Containers, though, tend to be that in the middle between serverless and VMs, because they allow you to still bring your monolith, but it's a great way for you to start moving towards being serverless. We've got various services that are available that you can leverage if you're running containers. Amazon Elastic Container Service, Amazon ECS, this you bring your Docker container as is on here. And then Amazon Elastic Container Service for Kubernetes, EKS, that's for your Kubernetes. And then Fargate is a serverless way of running these for you so that you don't have to provision instances to run them and then you end up with instances running that you don't actually need to be running, because then you're going to pay for those. So it's a serverless way of running your containers. And then they won't even all fit on here, but we have various services that you can leverage for security of your app on AWS. This here, we looked at this before, Cognito for securing your application. That's how you're authenticating your customers, your users of your app. That's your certificate management for your website, and that's your CDN. Here, this is where you this AWS Identity and Access Management, IAM. This is security, but this is where you are doing the authentication and security with your. So this is like in the background. This is for your developers. So you're saying which developer can work in what environment. That is where you would define all of that. You would define roles and users, and you've got policies there as well. Tokens for signing on to your environment. You can have those. Again, this talks to your users, to your developers, and all these other applications. CloudTrail and CloudTrail is this plays into your auditing space of things. This is every API call made onto your environment is stored here. So made by your customer and made by your developers, and that's how you can track auditing perform auditing on your environment. And key management services, and so we have those for you as well. And we've already touched on storage when we talked about the different databases that are available. We looked at NoSQL databases, this one, DynamoDB, and then we talked about relational database services. These are just all the storage services that we have outside of the object storage. So this is your data storage, your data model, and your data store. This is all that we have available on AWS. And talking about integration points, it's a lot of information when you're building. It's where do I start with all this technical knowledge, knowing what to do and how. We have documentation available for you. We've got tutorials that we have online. We've got videos that you can reference, quick starts that are available on AWS, and those can actually help you get going, and also part of your learning for those, if you are learning the environment, they can help you with that. And then lastly, we're right at the end. I know I flew through this, but I'm going to make this deck available for you to run through in your own time. I'm going to share my details here, my social media details, so that you can connect and chat and ask questions. But again, thank you so much for inviting me here today. It's really great to be here and meet all of you.
Great. Thank you very
Thank you so much.
Thank you. That's very interesting. Perfect. Cool. So I think now we have some time for the Q&A. So some questions were posted on the chat and answered already, but I'm just going quickly through them. And then at the end, you can always unmute yourself and ask any question that you may have. Perfect. So the first question is for Tato, who is asking, how do we get the AWS community started in Lesotho?
Chat to me. I'm going to post all my details now on the chat. Yeah, there's my LinkedIn, my Twitter. Please connect, and I'll guide you through it.
Perfect. Amazing. Thank you very much for that. Perfect. And then Lamin is asking how to move an app from a physical server to AWS. Yeah, to AWS. I don't know if that was answered in the presentation.
Yes, I think I flew very quickly past it. Containers are just one of the ways that people like to leverage, because what's awesome about them, you don't need to rewrite your application that's on-prem immediately. So you can put it onto containers and you deploy the containers on AWS. That's the quickest way. Or you can then do a rewrite on AWS. You can decide. There's various ways. I also talked about those VMs, EC2s and Lightsail. Those are other are services on AWS that you can leverage. So you can either go VM or you go containers, or if you are building natively in AWS, you can immediately go and leverage all the serverless services, the functions, the Lambda that I talked about.
Great. Thank you very much. And then we had a lot of questions regarding the presentation. So the presentation will be available to all the attendees, and we're also recording this session, so you will be able to find it again.
I've just shared the link to my speaker deck already, or for this presentation. You can just check there.
Great. Thank you very much. Perfect. That I don't think I missed any more questions on the chat. So please feel free to unmute yourself if you have more questions that you would like to ask. Lamine, yes, you can go ahead. Lamine, you raise your hand. You can go ahead. I'm not sure if you unmute. Yes, I can see that you're on mute. I'm asking you to unmute.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, now we can.
All right, great. All right. Well, thank you for taking the time. This was indeed very fast, but a lot to learn in a short amount of time, but fascinating stuff. And back to my question, I understand there are two options: using creating a container and then transporting the container into AWS, or using Lightsail. Which one is the most common and maybe easiest way to do this? Because we're really starting from scratch in terms of using AWS.
Yes, sorry, do you mind if I give an answer to that? I'm going to share with you 6 migration strategies for you. They range from what we call lift and shift, as well as re-platforming, or building serverless, or using native AWS type of highly efficient databases like Aurora. But if you are in that early stage where you prefer just to look at what we call a re-platforming, or call it a lift and shift, there is a service that's now launched. Let me send this also in the link for you. It's called the AWS Application Migration Service, which could be useful for you in terms of simplifying that migration. There's also a service for a database migration, and so on. But if you're concerned or anything, you've got access to startup solution architects, maybe even by myself. Or you can join the AWS Loft, where you can meet up with additional experts at convenient time slots for you. So I think, to just give a straight answer would be a bit irresponsible from me. I think it's probably better that we have a chat.
Okay. Excellent.
Cool. Pleasure. Yeah, I didn't mention this. We have an Ask an Expert offering, which is called AWS EMEA Startup Loft, where it's more than just myself, of course, at Amazon Web Services. There's database experts, migration experts, and you can basically book time there at the Loft, and we will then see you in any of those sessions, right? So I've just posted that for you as well.
Great. Thank you
Okay,
very
so
much.
there's some links coming through. Sorry for that.
Perfect. We can see them. Thank you.
Okay, pleasure.
Cool. feel free, guys, to raise your hands if you have any question. Last chance to ask. Any more questions? I don't see anything coming into the chat. Okay, Lamine, do you have an extra question? I see you post on the chat.
No, I was just confirming that I read something about the migration services, and it seemed fairly straightforward if it worked. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Oh,
Yeah.
thank you for the.
No problem. I do still think it would be good for us just to have a connect. Sometimes when you want to move to the cloud, you're going to take that first step, right? And it would be probably an opportunity for you also to look at some of the efficiency aspects out there. We talked earlier about the 5 pillars of success in building on the cloud, which I think is super important because it looks after your security and your scale and your resilience and so on and so on. I'm going to pop that link over here. There's a tool that you could use to analyze your current status. You won't get a big fat report, but you're going to get recommendations in terms of the technology and what you should look after. For example, security, and how to address that.
Okay, understood.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So that's why I say it's probably better that we just make sure we do connect. Security is not something that you want to take lightly.
Right. When you say connect, connect to Africa Arena, to you directly?
You're welcome to connect directly to myself. I'm also setting up myself as, with slots available at the AWS EMEA Loft. What's cool with that is that basically the platform will give us, conference room immediately as well. Plus, you would then able to see other experts available, not just myself.
Okay, excellent. How do I connect to you? Will you send me the links?
Yeah, I just posted it in this link, but that's why I said afterwards, Bintu will basically share the slides, and I'll also add additional resources there for you.
Okay.
Of course, you can send them out. I mean, like that works always. Zietsman at Amazon.com.
Okay, excellent. All right. Looking forward to it.
Thanks, Lamine. Pleasure.
Appreciate it.
No problem.
Perfect. Thank you very much. I can't see any more questions or any more heads up. So, Henri.
Yes, there's one question from Leo.
Sorry about that. I missed it. Leo, you can go ahead. Oh.
Yes. I was just inquiring more about the loft, about how extensive is the consultations and
free
advice from
startups
the
don't have money. It's free.
Okay, and how extensive is it? Like, is it like maybe a 30-minute, just a quick one, or can you go deep? How extensive does it be?
So you can book as many sessions as you want as a startup at the Loft. There's always an expert available. Typically what I do during that connect is just to better understand the problem you want to solve. Based on that information, then I normally connect you with, with myself offline or with an architect that is more focused at the particular problem you want to solve. Because obviously as a business you have various areas you want to address. It's not just the technology stuff.
Yeah. Okay,
So,
that's,
yeah.
thank you.
No problem.
Yeah.
Cool. Thanks for asking.
Cheers.
See you.
Perfect. Any more questions? Okay, perfect. I can't see anything else. Henri and Veliswa, any things you would like, any comments, anything you would like to add on your side?
From my
Nothing from
side,
me.
please definitely reach to me, whether it's via LinkedIn or email. I can't promise an immediate response because I'm sitting in an event today, so do accommodate a few minutes to get through everything. But the whole point of the startup programs and these sessions is to help you, and we're trying to reach you as best possible. Okay, thank you very much.
Okay. Veliswa, anything from your side?
Nothing from me. Thank you.
Thank you, Henri. Thank you, Veliswa, and thank you for all the alumni who joined the session today. I hope it was informative. And as we said during the session, we will share all the slides, the contact with you, and you can also watch it in YouTube in our website. Perfect. So thank you, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day. And yeah, looking forward to see you soon in one of the Africa Arena events.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Henri. Thanks, Veliswa. Bye.
Hey, ciao. Ciao.
Bye.